The condom wrapper fell out of my own sheets as I was making the bed. A condom I'd never seen before, a brand I'd never bought. And I knew for a fact that Maria and I hadn't used protection in over a year because she was on birth control. My hands were shaking as I picked up that wrapper, because in that moment I realized someone else had been in my bed. Someone else had been with my girlfriend. In my house, while I was at work, building the company that paid for everything they both enjoyed. But here's the part that will make your blood boil. When I found out who it was, the betrayal cut so deep that I questioned everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and love. This is the story of how I lost everything I cared about in a single night, and how the two people I trusted most destroyed me in the cruelest way possible. My name is David, and 6 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. At 29, I was running a successful tech startup that I'd built from nothing but late nights and relentless determination. We'd just closed our Series B funding round, $12 million, that validated every sacrifice I'd made over the past 4 years. Maria and I had been together for 3 years. She was 26, gorgeous, and worked at an upscale beauty salon downtown. Every morning, I'd watch her get ready for work, and I couldn't believe someone like her had chosen someone like me. I wasn't the most attractive guy. I spent more time staring at code than at the gym, but I could provide, and provide I did. Our apartment? I paid for it. Her car? Mine. The vacations, the dinners, the designer clothes she loved. All of it came from my company's success. But I didn't mind. I thought that's what love looked like, taking care of the person who mattered most. Then there was my brother Ron, 34 years old and still figuring out what he wanted to be when he grew up. Where I was methodical and driven, Ron was spontaneous and charming. Where I had to work for everything, things seemed to come naturally to him, especially attention from women. He had the kind of rugged good looks that turned heads, but he'd never held a steady job longer than 6 months. I'd been bailing him out financially for years. Rent money, car repairs, legal fees from that DUI last spring. I covered it all. After all, he was family. And despite our differences, despite his inability to get his life together, I genuinely cared about my big brother. Ron would come over for dinner most Sundays. Maria would cook. She was amazing in the kitchen. And we'd watch football or play video games. Looking back now, I realized those Sunday dinners were when everything started falling apart. But at the time, I just saw a happy family gathering. My girlfriend and my brother getting along, laughing at each other's jokes, sharing inside references I didn't quite catch. I was so focused on building my empire that I missed the foundation crumbling beneath my feet. The signs were there, though. Maria started working late more often. She'd come home smelling different. Not like the salon products I was used to, but like cigarettes and cheap cologne. Ron had started dressing better too, which I stupidly attributed to him finally getting his act together. When I asked where he was getting money for new clothes, he'd joke about finding new income streams. I even encouraged their friendship. When Maria mentioned she was helping Ron with his resume, I thought it was sweet. When she said they'd grab coffee to discuss job opportunities, I was proud of her for trying to help my brother. I was funding both their lives, and somehow I convinced myself I was building some kind of perfect family dynamic. The night everything changed started like any other. It was a Tuesday in March, and I was working late in my home office, preparing for a presentation to potential investors. Maria had come home around 9 p.m., saying she'd stayed after hours to help with inventory at the salon. She seemed nervous, jumpy. When I asked about her day, her answers were short, distracted. She went to bed early, claiming she had a headache. I didn't think much of it. We'd both been stressed lately. Around 2 a.m., I finally shut down my laptop and headed to bed. That's when I heard it, the soft buzzing of Maria's phone on her nightstand. She was fast asleep, and the screen was lighting up with notification after notification. I wasn't the type to snoop through someone's phone. I trusted Maria completely. But something about the frequency of the messages, the way they kept coming in the middle of the night, made my stomach turn. I told myself I was just checking to make sure it wasn't an emergency. The first message I saw made my blood run cold. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. David's presentation meeting runs until 6, so we have hours. It was from Ron. My hands were shaking as I scrolled up through their conversation history. What I found was months of messages. Intimate, explicit, planning secret meetings while I was at work. They'd been seeing each other in our apartment, in my bed, while I was building the company that funded both their lives. The messages went back to January. Ron talking about how David would never suspect his perfect girlfriend. Maria responding that she felt bad sometimes, but Ron understood her in ways David never could. Photos I won't describe in detail, but that left no doubt about the physical nature of their relationship. But the worst part wasn't the affair itself. It was how they talked about me. Ron calling me my oblivious little brother who thinks money solves everything. Maria laughing about how I was so wrapped up in work that I'd never notice. They were actively mocking the person who was supporting both of them. I sat there in the dark for 3 hours, reading every message, seeing every photo, understanding exactly how blind I'd been. By sunrise, I felt like a completely different person. The man who'd gone to sleep believing in loyalty and family was gone. In his place was someone harder, someone who'd learned that the people closest to you can cause the deepest wounds. I didn't confront them immediately. Instead, I spent the next week documenting everything. Screenshots, dates, times my business mind kicked in, treating their betrayal like a hostile takeover I needed to defend against. During those 7 days, I watched them both with new eyes. Ron came over for dinner that Sunday, joking and laughing like nothing had changed. Maria kissed me goodbye each morning, telling me she loved me while planning to meet my brother the moment I left for work. The acting was flawless. If I hadn't seen those messages, I never would have suspected a thing. It made me wonder how long I'd been living in a fantasy while everyone around me knew the truth. I chose to confront Maria first. The following Friday evening, I came home early and found her getting ready to go out. She said she was meeting girlfriends for drinks, but I'd already seen the messages confirming she was meeting Ron at a hotel downtown. "Maria," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We need to talk." Something in my tone must have warned her. Her face went pale, and she stopped applying her lipstick. "I know about you and Ron." The lipstick tube fell from her hand and clattered on the bathroom floor. For a moment, she tried to deny it, stammering about not knowing what I meant. But when I started reciting specific messages word for word, her whole body seemed to deflate. "David, I can explain." "Explain what? Explain how you've been sleeping with my brother in our bed for 3 months? Explain how you've been laughing about how stupid and oblivious I am? Explain how you're planning to meet him tonight while I thought you were with girlfriends?" She started crying then, the kind of dramatic tears I'd seen her use to get out of speeding tickets. But this time, they had no effect on me. Something inside me had turned to ice. "It just happened," she sobbed. "Ron was going through a tough time and I was trying to help him, and one thing led to another." "Stop," I held up my hand. "Just stop. I've read the messages, Maria. This wasn't some accident or moment of weakness. This was planned, deliberate, and cruel. You've been planning around my work schedule to betray me in my own home." She tried to approach me, to touch my face like she always did when she wanted forgiveness for some small transgression. But I stepped back. "I want you out, tonight. Take whatever you can carry, and I'll have the rest of your things boxed up by tomorrow. David, please, we can work through this. I made a mistake, but I love you." "No, you don't. People who love each other don't do this. People who love each other don't mock their partner's trust behind their back. You love my money, Maria. You love the life I provided. But you don't love me." The conversation with Ron 2 days later was different. He didn't try to deny it or make excuses. When I showed up at his apartment, the apartment I'd been helping pay for, he just nodded like he'd been expecting this moment. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked. He shrugged, not even having the decency to look ashamed. "It wasn't planned, David. It just happened. The same way your rent just happens to be late every month. The same way you just happen to need money for car repairs and legal fees and everything else I've been covering for years. Look, I didn't mean for it to happen. Maria's hot, she was available, and you were always working." I cut him off. "She was available? She was my girlfriend, Ron. Your brother's girlfriend. Half brother," he corrected, like that somehow made it better. That's when it hit me. Ron had never seen me as real family. I was just a convenient source of funding, someone whose success he could leech off of, while feeling superior about his looks and charm. The brotherly bond I thought we had existed only in my mind. "I'm done," I told him. "No more money, no more Sunday dinners, no more bailing you out. You're on your own." He laughed, actually laughed. "Come on, David. You'll cool off in a few weeks, you always do." "No, I won't. And when your life falls apart, without my money propping it up, remember that you chose a few months of sleeping with my girlfriend over a lifetime of having a brother who cared about you." I left his apartment that day knowing I'd never see him again by choice. The weeks following the breakup were the hardest of my life. Not because I missed Maria. I'd realized I'd been in love with an illusion, a performance she'd put on to secure her lifestyle. The hard part was accepting how completely I'd misjudged two people I'd trusted with everything. I threw myself into work with a vengeance. The investor presentation went perfectly, and we secured another $8 million in funding. My startup was growing faster than ever, but success felt hollow when there was no one to share it with. Friends and colleagues would ask about Maria, and I'd give vague answers about us growing apart. Only my business partner Jake knew the full story, and he made it clear that both Maria and Ron were banned from any company events. I started going to therapy, not because I was broken, but because I needed to understand how I'd been so blind. Dr. Chen helped me see that my need to provide for everyone had actually enabled their worst behaviors. I'd created a dynamic where Maria didn't have to value me as a person because she knew I'd always be there as a provider, and Ron didn't have to respect me as a brother because he knew I'd always bail him out. The hardest part was learning to trust again. Every woman I met, I wondered if she was interested in me or my success. Every new friendship, I questioned whether it was genuine or transactional. The betrayal had rewired my brain to look for deception everywhere, but I was determined not to let their actions define my future. I started working out, not to look like Ron, but to feel strong and confident in my own skin. I took up hobbies I'd neglected while focusing on work and relationships. Photography, hiking, learning to cook. For the first time in years, I was building a life for myself, not for someone else's approval. 3 months after the breakup, I got a text from Maria. She was sorry. She missed me. She'd made a terrible mistake. Ron had left her for another woman. Apparently, once the novelty wore off and he realized she had no money of her own, his interest faded quickly. I didn't respond. A month later, Ron called. He'd been evicted from his apartment and needed money for a deposit on a new place. When I didn't answer, he started texting, then emailing. The messages grew increasingly desperate as his situation deteriorated. I blocked his number. 6 months after the breakup, karma began serving its own brand of justice. Through mutual friends, I learned that Maria had been struggling. Without my financial support, she couldn't afford the lifestyle she'd become accustomed to. She'd moved back in with her parents and was working double shifts at the salon just to make ends meet. The designer clothes were being sold on Facebook Marketplace. The car I'd helped her buy was repossessed when she couldn't make payments. She'd tried dating, but word had gotten around our social circle about what she'd done. Apparently, cheating on your successful boyfriend with his unemployed brother isn't the kind of reputation that attracts quality men. The few guys who were interested were looking for the same thing. Ron had been. A quick fling with no commitment. Ron's situation was even worse. Without my safety net, his life unraveled quickly. He'd bounced from couch to couch after the eviction, wearing out his welcome with friends who got tired of his inability to contribute to rent or groceries. His drinking had gotten worse, and he'd been arrested twice for bar fights. Last I heard, he was living in a weekly motel, doing odd jobs for cash, and looking significantly older than his 34 years. The good looks that had always been his currency were fading under the stress of actually having to take care of himself. I wish I could say I felt sorry for them, but I didn't. They'd made their choices with full knowledge of the consequences. They'd gambled that they could have their affair while keeping me as their financial backup plan, and they'd lost. Meanwhile, my life continued to improve. The company went public 18 months after the breakup, making me wealthy beyond anything I'd imagined when I started coding in my college dorm room. I'd bought a house in the hills, traveled to places I'd always wanted to see, and built a network of genuine friendships based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. I still hadn't found love again, but I wasn't desperate for it anymore. I'd learned the difference between being alone and being lonely. I was no longer willing to settle for someone who saw me as a provider first and a person second. Sometimes people ask if I regret how everything played out. If I wish I'd tried to work things out with Maria or reconcile with Ron. The answer is simple: no. They showed me exactly who they were when they thought I wasn't looking. Leaving them the first time saved me from years of further betrayal and disrespect. The hardest lesson I learned was that love and loyalty can't be bought. All the dinners I paid for, all the bills I covered, all the problems I solved with my checkbook, none of it created genuine affection or respect. It just created dependency and eventually resentment. But here's what I know now that I wish I'd known then. Your worth isn't measured by how much you can provide for others. Your value isn't determined by how useful you are to people who see you as a resource rather than a person. And sometimes, the people who claim to love you are really just loving what you can do for them. The betrayal that destroyed my old life ultimately gave me the clarity to build a better one. I'm not the same trusting, naive guy who went to sleep that Tuesday night 6 months ago. I'm stronger, wiser, and more selective about who I let into my inner circle. Maria and Ron taught me that some people will take everything you're willing to give and still want more. They taught me that family isn't always blood, and love isn't always real. But most importantly, they taught me that my worth doesn't depend on anyone else's approval or appreciation. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, if you've ever felt like you were giving everything and getting nothing in return, if you've ever wondered whether the people closest to you really care about you or just what you can do for them, you're not alone. These experiences break us, but they can also rebuild us into something stronger. What's your story? Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was living a double life? How did you handle betrayal from family or loved ones? Share your experiences in the comments below. Sometimes the best healing comes from knowing we're not the only ones who've walked this difficult path. And if this story resonated with you, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. I share real stories about life's hardest lessons every week, because sometimes we need to hear that others have survived the worst betrayals and come out stronger on the other side. Trust is earned, loyalty is chosen, and your worth is never determined by someone else's inability to see it. Remember that, and you'll save yourself a lot of heartbreak. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.